try to tell you something about glycans, how important they are for inflammation, and can we actually make a decision to change them, and in this way stop inflammation. So we all know that healthy life habits can expand our lifespan and health span for up to a decade. But most of us does not do that. And we know that caloric restriction can make a number of different model animals live longer. But the question is the monkey on the left happier? Do we want to be hungry for the next 2 decades to live a little bit longer? And we are all different. There is no standard human. Some of us maybe do not have to be this monkey on caloric restriction to live healthier and to live longer. We all know that sleep, diet, stress, physical activity, they're all important. But they're not equally important for each of us. And we just do not know where do we fall here because we are lacking the proper biomarkers. So industry has now accepted that we are wasting 80% of smart drugs because we are giving them to wrong people. But we are also wasting up to 80% of our lifestyle intervention because we are doing the wrong things. And one of the reasons why we are lacking the proper biomarkers is because the field has focused on genes. For decades, we are sequencing millions and millions of people with going deeper and deeper and getting more genetic data and not becoming much smarter. Because we know it's only 20% of longevity and around 30% of the complex diseases, which is actually genetic. And one big aspect of our molecular life, which majority of science is still ignoring, are the glycans. While glycans actually are responsible for the majority of inter-individual variations. Actually, the first biomarker of personalized medicine are glycans, blood groups. ABO blood groups are chemically glycans. So when we think about glycans, we should imagine this protein revolving in the middle. This is the S-glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2 virus. All these hairy things on the surface, these are the glycans. And many people still study only the protein part. This is the figure on the left. And the best analogy is this poor bird without a single feather. We can do a lot of good science on that bird. We can study physiology of a bird. We can study eyesight. We can study bird walking. But we will never see that bird flying. Because the bird without its feathers cannot fly. Protein without its glycans does not function normally. Just one word of caution here. Glycation, glycated hemoglobin, HbA1c, this is something completely different. Glycation is a chemical damage, taking a shotgun and firing at the protein. Glycosylation is a sophisticated post-translational modification. And the majority of proteins are glycosylated. And to understand biology, to see the whole picture, we have to include glycans in our story. And we went there first. We were the first to start doing large glycomic studies on humans. It was 15 years ago. So far, we analyzed over 150,000 people. Out of the 891 something thousand published human glycomes, we generated nearly 160,000. So we definitely lead this field, and we lead it in collaboration with some of the leading researchers all around the world. They have fantastic cohorts, fantastic biological samples. We do our analytics, and then we try to understand what is going on. And in the last couple of years, we really managed to raise it to the level of publishing in the best journals, including Circulation Research, Diabetes Care, Gastroenterology, a couple of Nature journals. So glycomics is coming to the mainstream. One of the first things we learned when we looked at the large population cohorts was that age is actually complicating our studies because we couldn't use patients and controls who are of different age because the glycans change a lot with age. These are 5 different cohorts from different parts of the world, different glycans, they change a lot with age. And actually, based on that knowledge, we developed something we call the Glycan Age, the index of biological age, which is now commercially available. Of course, I'm heavily conflicted there because I'm one of the inventors. But what we know is that when people are young, they have glycans like this, which actually suppress inflammation. And as we are getting older, our glycans change into this type of structures, which are actually promoting inflammation. And they do it by regulating activity of our immunoglobulins, but also by managing many other aspects of our immune system. So we have a set of molecules which change with age, which regulate inflammation, and they are attached to immunoglobulin G. An interesting thing here is that even though they're not so accurate in predicting chronological age, which is, by the way, not important because we all know our chronological age, the difference is explained by lifestyle and diseases. So when we look at the difference between the Glycan age and chronological age, it heavily correlates with the biomarkers of unhealthy life. So people living unhealthy life will have their glycans aging faster than people living healthy lives. People with the different diseases will have their glycans altered toward the aging, older glycom. So the last 4 bars are just effects of age. All other bars are different diseases, including lupus, RA, IBD, diabetes, colorectal cancer, many other diseases. And what we see, majority of people who are sick, different diseases, will have the same type of changes. And in many cases, we see glycans change before there is a diagnosis of a disease. So what I think we are seeing here, we are seeing a functional role of immunoglobulin glycans in regulating low-grade chronic inflammation, which then contributes to development of different diseases. Because remember, the disease names are based on a symptom and a location, and they were defined over 100 years ago. So molecular mechanisms could be very similar in many different diseases. For example, one very popular disease now is the COVID. And David Sinclair and I speculated 2 years ago that biological age would be a much better predictor of disease severity than the chronological age. And we published the editorial in Aging. We managed to prove it later that year. Yes, people with older glycom were more likely to get a severe COVID. And also people who had a severe COVID had much more extensive changes in their glycom than people who had mild COVID. So this is mild or asymptomatic, the first 2 panels. The second 2 are people who had really severe COVID. They aged up to a decade in a couple of weeks. But SARS-CoV-2 virus is not that special because influenza does a similar thing. So if you have a severe influenza, you might also age a lot in a couple of weeks. And we still do not know how much of that can be reverted. We've seen people, for example, I gained 5 years when I had COVID, and I still have them. So I didn't manage to lose them. When we look in different parts of the world, people are different. And the best predictor, practically on a line with the glycom, is the expected lifespan. So if you live in a country where you will live longer, your glycans age slower than if you live in a country where your expected lifespan is shorter, and this highly correlates with the Human Development Index. And when we saw the link with mortality, we said, okay, mortality, what is the major source of mortality? Cardiovascular diseases. What can we see in cardiovascular diseases? Glycans correlate strongly with the cardiovascular disease risk score. This is something we published 4 years ago. Then we went into the prospective cohort, samples collected 30 years ago, followed up clinically for a decade later, and the glycans predict future cardiovascular events, so heart attack or stroke, as good as the AHA score. In women, even better than the AHA score. And this seems to be at least partly causative, because in mice, we were able to protect obese mice from hypertension by feeding them dietary supplement, which improves IgG cellulation. So the mice would become obese, of course, on a high-fat diet, but they would never develop hypertension. This was published in Circulation 3 years ago. Diabetes, similar story. We see a huge predictive power of glycans for future development, not only in diabetes, but even insulin resistance. So glycans change 5 to 7 years before insulin resistance is being developed. And they also predict both prevalent and incident diabetic complications. And this is a gradual process. So when we look here, this is disease, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 7 years, 8 to 10 years from the disease. So 7 years before the disease, we already see a change in glycans, which are on the path of disease development. Because disease is an endpoint. This is when we see a patient. Something is not working, patient comes for help. But there is a probably over decade-long molecular process which led to these diseases, at least for the complex diseases. And complex diseases are point of no return. We don't heal people we don't cure people from the complex diseases. But if we find them early, if we find only the biomarkers which are changing, then preventive intervention, either pharmacological or lifestyle, could actually either postpone or even completely prevent disease. And immunoglobulin glycans play a very important role there. I don't have time to go into details. We prepared a very comprehensive review, which is freely available on this link here. What I would like to tell you in the last 4.5 minutes is, can we revert it? Is this something we can actually change by making a decision? And when we look, and the Glycan Age is on the market now for a couple of years, we collaborate with hundreds of clinics all around the world. And for example, one of the first was Jose Rafael in New York. His patients are 20, 30 years younger. When they enter the praxis, they may not be, but with time, they're becoming younger. Some of the prominent colleagues, Tim Spector, we are mapping him for over a decade now. He was reasonably well, then got worse, decided to change something in his lifestyle, and lost 11 years in a half a year. We actually recorded Instagram Live about that, so if you want to see details, look at Instagram Live. In women, perimenopause is a very difficult period. Blue are men, we age linearly. Red are women, we see a huge acceleration in glycan aging in the perimenopause period. So normally what would happen, women would have an excellent glycan age, and in this particular case, lady aged 30 glycan years in a year. Of course, she freaked out. Everybody freaks out. Fortunately, with the proper hormone optimization, this can be reverted. And we had access to a very nice placebo-controlled randomized trial conducted a couple of decades ago, where we were able to show that estrogen is here causative because the disruption of gonadal hormones induced accelerated aging. If there was a supplement of estrogen, this did not happen. If there was a placebo, they aged a lot. So perimenopause is a period where we're also now trying to provide support for women, because what glycans do, they usually change before other symptoms. So glycan age would accelerate, and there are no other symptoms of perimenopause. And the reason why we see it on glycans is because the estrogen is a very important factor. Quantification of estrogen in perimenopause is very difficult because it fluctuates a lot, but IgG integrates it in a couple of weeks. So IgG glycom for estrogen is analogy of the HbA1c for glucose level. Very useful. We hope to have it in the clinic relatively soon. Some people hate hormones. Weight loss also works. Bariatric surgery, we had a patient improving 37 glycan years in 6 months. Not everybody improves that much, but bariatric surgery works in most of the people. Again, a little bit too aggressive. Is the normal weight loss okay? We had 2,000 twins tracked for 15 to 20 years in 3 time points. Those who were gaining weight were aging faster than those who were losing weight. So just a regular weight loss, which doesn't have to be very large, can be beneficial. Caloric restriction works more or less in everybody. These were 7 different cohorts from all around Europe. People on a low-calorie diet, they did improve. Nobody can maintain a low-calorie diet. It's hopeless. So they had a 5 different maintenance diet after that. And on each of the diets, some people improved, some people got worse. There is no magic diet. Each of us is different. We have to find what actually works for us. And today this is possible because we can quantify it and see what actually works. The same goes for exercise. Majority of middle-aged people, when they want to fix their health by exercising, they actually overtrain. and they got worse. So exercise has to be carefully optimized. Microbiome is extremely important. Fecal microbiome transplantation can completely change also your glycome. So my final slide, glycans are important. They should be looked at, they should not be ignored. IgG glycans are functional effectors of inflammation. They either promote or suppress inflammation. And this is based on a relatively small number of chemical structures which can be reliably quantified and can be tracked. And at the end, I have to acknowledge that all this was funded with many, many different grants, and I thank you for their support, and I thank you for your time.